Welcome to the Friday edition of the Bradshaw Chronicles. I am your host, Bryan Lee Whatley. Tonight's special guest is Nicholas Stafford-Deitsch. Nicholas was born in the USA, but he has lived in the UK since childhood. He was educated in England and holds 2 degrees from Oxford University. The book we are discussing tonight from him is The Toucan Feather. It is his first published novel, and it introduces a simple and a timely philosophy that has important social, economic, and political implications centered around the belief of opening your mind to discover yourself in order to make a change. Not only will the book entertain you with its characters and thought-provoking concepts, but will wow you with the illustrations done by him. As Nicholas says, the Takamu is a new symbol based on an ancient wisdom that unites those of us who care about the future of mankind. Our musical guest tonight is Mr. Spoon. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy the Friday edition. How are you doing today, Nicholas?
I'm very well, thank you, Brian.
It's great to have you on the Bradshaw Chronicles. Reading your book, it's absolutely amazing for the pictures, the words that you put into it. It's an excellent read. But before we get into your book, can you tell us a little bit about who you are? Can you tell our fans about who you are and what you do and what encouraged you to write this book?
Yes, who I am. I'm half American. One side of my family were New Yorkers, and I was born in the States. And when my parents got divorced, my mother brought me and my 2 brothers back to the UK, where I've lived ever since. I've been educated in the UK. The book was really something which I felt very strongly needed writing about 8 or 9 years ago when I started thinking about this project. So I've been working on this and working on the illustrations for the best part of a decade, I suppose, now.
Between the illustrations and writing, you've been working on this book for a decade?
Not full time. The first draft of the book was ready after probably about a year, 18 months. And I showed it to an agent, and the agent said, it was amazing. She was very impressed, and she said, wouldn't it be interesting to get it illustrated? So we spoke to a number of illustrators and looked at their work, but at the end of the day I wasn't really happy with it. The problem with professional illustrators is they read a book and then they depict scenes from the book, and I think the problem is someone will pick up a book in a bookshop and look through the illustrations, and the pictures will give away the plot. So we didn't really find an illustrator whose work we liked. So I probably rather foolishly embarked upon the project of illustrating it myself, and I started from scratch. I mean, I used to do a bit of drawing at school, but it was a very, very long process to learn to draw, and an awful lot of pictures got torn up. I wouldn't say it's been full-time for the sort of 9 or 10 years, but probably about half my time over that period has been writing and illustrating the book.
Well, the pictures, the fact that you actually drew these yourselves, I mean, the whole book is phenomenal, but the pictures, the illustrations, they're amazing. Now,
thank you.
The fact, it seems like they would take a long time to draw because they're so, just like the book, and it's what's so great about the illustrations and the book. The book is so very well detailed, and the pictures are as well. It's not like some simple drawing that somebody just put up there. The pictures are intricate. They're very, very detailed.
Well, I'm a very sort of detail-oriented person, and I'm a very visual person, and I know it's a corny thing to say, but I would say I'm a perfectionist. So on many occasions, I would do a picture, and I'd be fairly happy with it, and I'd show it to people, and they would say, yes, that's brilliant, that's great, that's perfect, it's finished. And I would then sit on it for a week or 2, and then I'd go back to it, and I would see, well, it'd be interesting if I did this, or if I changed that. And so most of the pictures, I think hardly any of the pictures were done in one sitting. It's been really a process of doing a picture, leaving it, starting another one, coming back to the first one. And that's why the thing has taken a long time, because I'm probably quite a slow worker. and the writing has been the same. I like to, both with words and with a pen, I like to paint a picture. And when I was at school many years ago, I remember when we were writing essays, we were taught to really build a scene and to be descriptive. And I think one of the great shames about most literature today is there's very little description. It's all about plot and it's all about pace. And I think that's a great shame. So I went the old-fashioned route and put in a lot of description.
Again, sitting here looking at the images on here, I could see where you could. I can completely understand that from reading the book. I completely understand where you're coming from in terms of drawing it, somebody saying it perfect, then you turn around and go back and working on it because these pictures weren't done, in a half a day or a day. I could see where you're just absolutely making perfection on them because they're so very detailed and intrinsic in terms of each particular picture for the place where it was fitting in the book. So, and I agree with you. Whenever you have an outside artist actually write or sketch the images for you or take photographs for images for you in the book, sometimes they aren't necessarily what you really imagined in your head when you were writing it. And so
absolutely right. And one of the things which I did once I'd taken the decision to illustrate it myself was I thought it'd be much more interesting if a number of the illustrations were trompe-l'oeil. That means they have hidden meanings in them. And so about a third of the pictures are actually not really what you think you're looking at. And I have a website, tokamu.com, in which I reveal the meaning of 4 of the illustrations. And one of the things I would love the reader to do is when they look at a picture, wonder what it's really saying to them, because there are a lot of tricks, visual tricks, and there are a lot of messages hidden in the illustrations. And you couldn't get that from a normal illustrator whose job is just to depict scenes. So I had a lot of fun, and I found it very challenging but rewarding too, to add a lot of hidden messages in the pictures.
Oh, see, that's a cool insider. I didn't pick up on when I was reading the book and going back and looking for the pictures. I wasn't looking for the hidden messages, so now I'm going to have to go back and look, and that's at tokamu.com.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And on the website, I reveal the meaning of 4 of the pictures, just so that the reader can get an idea of how my mind works, and then it's really up to them to look at the others and see if they can find out what I'm talking about. Because most of the book is about a concept, and the concept is called Tokamu, as in the website name. And the message of Tokamu, one of the ways I reveal it is through the illustrations in the book. The other way is obviously in the book itself. And on the website, there's a short essay explaining the Tokamu philosophy. So there are various different ways in which I sort of present my ideas on this subject.
Now, how you actually... So let's go ahead and get into the book and the philosophy parts of it, because when reading it, whenever I was reading it, it's going into what I'm thinking, and you said you're a very visual person. I'm the same exact way. I have to visualize everything in my mind, and that's what I loved about this book, is it really draws pictures to you, and you really have to. And sometimes I speed read when I read, but I literally slowed down when I read your novel because I wanted to make sure that I captured every visual image in my mind about what was going on. And then what's also so great about it is when I'm picturing what's going on, I'm getting lost into this world. It's really pulling me into the pages of words of your novel. Me picturing being there with the characters of this book. And then on the same time of it, you were talking about the hidden meanings of your pictures. I'm sitting there trying to guess where the end of the book is going, each time, because I'm thinking, oh, okay, I see where this is going. And then it keeps changing, and it keeps changing. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So let's talk about the book in terms of the characters and why you decided to write it that way, because your philosophy, like you mentioned earlier, the Tokamu philosophy, if you're not really paying attention to the book, then you could kind of miss it, even though it's inside of it all over the place. The content first or the philosophy?
What I was trying to achieve with the book was to write something which would be thought-provoking for anyone from sort of young adults upwards. My original sort of youngest age I had in mind was about 14.
Okay, I can understand that.
My editor said actually these days people growing up earlier and readers are getting more sophisticated, and he said it could actually be read comfortably by a 10 to 12-year-old. I don't know whether you would agree with that, Brian, but it wasn't quite as the age group I had in mind. But I feel that there are a number of enormous problems facing mankind. I mean, there always have been, but I think that things at a number of different levels are coming to a head. We have the same old problems which we've had for millennia, such as racism and religious intolerance is obviously very much on the table. We have xenophobia, the way people treat each other, generally and specifically. All those things we've had for a long time. We also have now, and we've had since 2008, an incredible financial stroke economic problem. And the model which the developed world has been operating by is unsustainable. And the other thing which has happened most recently here in the UK is we've had some very unpleasant riots, which you've probably seen on the news in the States. Now, my philosophy, which, again, I started really thinking about 10 years ago, is that the problem with our politicians, the problem with the way most people lead their lives in the West is financially oriented or motivated, and politicians work on the same basis, i.e. politicians look at the economy. Everything is about the economy, and everything is really ultimately valued against the economy. And the problem with economics is really the study of a chocolate cake. If you had a chocolate cake and you had 10 people sitting around wanting a piece, everyone wants a bigger piece than is going to be available. And what normally happens is one person gets a much bigger piece than he can actually eat, that he's very happy, and the other 9 people get rather less than they wanted. And probably 1 or 2 of them will end up hungry. So a few years ago I was advising the Conservative Party here, who are now the government, about a concept which was that Western governments should look more at people's well-being, because the thing about well-being is it's an infinite resource. The piece of the cake that is not sliced up. If people lead their lives in certain ways, everyone can have as big a slice of that cake as possible, within reason. We have to be realistic about these things.
Right.
But so what I'm saying is that the Tokamu philosophy is basically saying, instead of everyone trying to make as much money as possible and to be as rich as possible, to look at other values, to look at what is really important in life, and to look at what will actually improve their well-being. And if we all improve our well-being, it's obviously good for us. We will be happier, we will enjoy life more. But the other side of the coin is it will take pressure off the economy. It will reduce pressure on public services. It will release capital for other uses. And right at the moment, when there isn't enough money to go around and the politicians are wondering how they're going to deal with this enormous debt problem, I'm suggesting that one tool they could use is for people to improve their well-being, so that less money is actually needed for us to lead our lives, at a comfortable or a happy way.
Yeah, I agree. There's way too much attention towards the economy, unfortunately, because now we're in such a recession, and money's so tight and everything. But you're right about that. People do focus in on it versus the overall standards of living a proper life, just living a really well-rounded, very solid life, to where even our politicians our politicians over here always get the bigger slice of the pie, unfortunately.
Yes, exactly.
And go ahead.
We were very lucky to escape the 2008 financial crash, and we're back in that or a more serious situation now. And the West has really lived its lifestyles on the back of debt, which is unsustainable. And in the last decade or two, it's basically been a process whereby the Chinese has been lending the West and the US in particular money to buy Chinese product. So the Chinese are now owning a huge amount of US government debt. So Americans are really borrowing money to buy Chinese products because they want to keep their lifestyles at a certain level. And that process is coming to an end. It has to. This can't go on much further. And as long as people search purely for happiness via, financial gain, we're all going to get into terrible, terrible trouble. And the process may be beginning. So the Tokamu philosophy is very simple and it's fairly complicated. It's saying, yes, we need to address our well-being, because in my opinion, and in the opinion of most of the psychologists I've spoken to, people who experience good well-being think and act differently. So the idea is, I thought I'd write a book which hopefully is thought-provoking and inspirational, so that people would begin to question things. And the website, tokamu.com, gives more information, gives the nitty-gritty of the argument, if you like. So there are two different ways of presenting this theory. And when you read the book, a symbol is revealed piece by piece, which is actually it comprises 5 different symbols which are superimposed on each other. And the idea is, I believe there's an opportunity to introduce a new symbol, which is a sort of tiny alternative to the peace sign. Now, the peace sign, as we all know, was very popular in the 60s, especially the 70s, and it's become less popular. You still see it, of course. But the problem with the peace sign was it was great in what it aspired to, but it didn't actually say how you could achieve peace. So people would wear it, or they'd have a flag with it on it, but it didn't really go much further than that. The toucan feather reveals a symbol called a tokamu, and the tokamu contains within it the well-being methodology. So the idea is, as you read the book, you begin to understand what this symbol means and why it means it and why it's important. So I'm hoping, my ambition, I suppose, from all this, is that the Tokamu symbol will become very popular, very widely duplicated and copied and worn and promoted by people who care about the future of mankind.
One thing I liked about the book as well is you mentioned the actual symbol is comprised of multiple images. And as I was reading, I'd go through and I'd see each image. And it dawned on me at first when I saw the first image. And then as I was reading through and I started seeing some of the other ones, I started realizing on how you were putting them together. And that was, to be honest with you, that was brilliant. I mean, throughout the book on how you did it and then how it all comes together. It's a great figurative way of telling the story and being able to capture it. So I have to applaud you on that one. That was pretty cool. Because the final image is awesome.
That in itself, designing the symbol took weeks and weeks and weeks. It probably took months, in fact. Like all these things, I kept seeing it wasn't quite right, it needed a little bit of manipulation. But I'm happy with the end result, and it does what it intends doing. And as you read the book, some people tend to read the book just because they enjoy it as a piece of fiction. Other people stop and think and get a lot more out of it. And what would make me very happy and very pleased would be if it was the sort of book which people discussed and debated and talked about, because although the message is fairly clear, I hope very much I haven't rammed it down people's throats, so that someone will say, oh, I think the symbol meant this, or I saw that in this illustration, and get a debate going, get a dialogue started. And I know that's begun to happen, and people send me messages and make interesting comments. And that was one of the things I wanted to do. I wanted to write something which would stimulate people and get them talking.
Right. You mentioned earlier, as far as your target audience for the age on this novel, and you mentioned somewhere around 14 and above, and some people have mentioned 10 and above.
Yeah.
And when you said that at first, when you were first talking about the age groups, I was thinking, okay, maybe it'd be a little bit older. And then when you started mentioning a little bit younger, I said, you know what? I believe so. I believe the way it's written, because the storyline that you put behind the philosophy and how you build it up, I believe a 10-year-old could grab that. I believe a 14-year-old would definitely just get involved into it, and it's something that would kind of entrap them. I couldn't necessarily see them sitting down all in one day, sitting and reading it, but it's possible that they could. It's.
My children are a little older now, and I can't really remember what they were reading when they were 10. But I have friends whose children are of that age and they've read it, and no one has felt it was too old for them. They wouldn't necessarily get the message or the core message, but there are plenty of messages and themes in the book, and reasons why they would enjoy it. And I hope very much that the book becomes a sort of approved text at schools, in formal education, because I think the younger people begin to start thinking about these sorts of issues, I think that the more likely that they will hold on to what they discover for the rest of their lives. So part of the reason I did the cryptic illustrations is I love the idea of a classroom and the teacher, on the projector or on the computer screen showing one of the illustrations and then challenging the classroom to work out the meaning alongside reading the book, so that you're trying to inspire people from two different angles. And I found that when people work out the illustrations, or they go to the website and they look at one and they understand, they get very, very excited normally, because they just didn't see that. And I hope and I feel that could prove to be quite an effective mechanism to make a message stick.
I agree. I like that. I could actually see this book in our educational systems. I can definitely understand that.
I hope so.
Yeah, whether you talk about a sociology course or whether you talk about world government or anything of that nature, even a philosophy course, I could definitely understand where this would come into play there and how it's put together. And I guess I was looking at it in terms of somebody 10 or 14 reading it. If you look at some of the books that are so intricate now that are very popular on the national bestseller list and the #1 list out there, some of them are rather detailed. And I think nowadays kids are a little bit more advanced than they were 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Yeah. I think you're right, and one of the tools, if that's the right word, which I've used when writing the book, is I've used a lot of allegory and metaphor. And again, you can read it just as a overly exciting piece of fiction, but actually, if you step back and think about it, you'll realize it is all allegory and it is all metaphor. The world I've depicted in the book is not a real world, but it's very like our world. But I played around with a lot of things, and I've worked with some psychologists in sort of designing certain scenes in the book, and I won't go into detail because I don't want to give anything away, but about half the readers get to the end of the book, and then the proverbial light bulb goes off over their head, or goes on over their head, and they suddenly realize what the last third of the book is actually saying and what it's actually about.
The detail and how you put the metaphors together, even with the characters that you put together, I was actually wondering if you based it off of something real, because there's a couple of details inside the book to where you mention of today's society or of countries and customs that are of around the world. And so when I was reading, I was like going, okay, now is he actually describing a place that's in existence just because of some of the other places that you mentioned in it? Somebody throws a stick, and if they don't hit the object, the stick comes around back to them. So that led me to believe, oh, okay, I know where he's talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I must admit I had quite a lot of fun at times writing this book, and I decided to write about a place which is very familiar but strangely different. So, as you correctly say, Brian, I certainly have used examples which will be entirely familiar with people, and they'll say, oh, I know where he's talking about here or there. But on other occasions, I've taken animals and I put them in parts of the world you don't find them, and I've done the same with the fish and with the plants, and I've invented animals and I've played around with animals and plants. So in the illustrations, for example, a botanist looked at them and said, wow, these are incredibly detailed and very, very accurate. And he said, but there's actually no such plant as that. So that was really as much for my own amusement. I'll tell you very briefly why the book came to be called The Toucan Feather. When I was writing an early draft, my daughter, who at the time was about 8 or 9 years old, I said to her, I can't think of a title for this book. What should I call this book? And she said, The Green Man, The Broken Car, The Red Helicopter, The Toucan Feather, The Yellow Mousetrap. And I said, stop, I like that one. What did you say, the Toucan Feather? And she said, yes. And I said, right, we're going to call the book The Toucan Feather. And once I'd made that decision, it rather determined quite a lot of the sort of decisions I took about, the location and the plants and animals which were going to feature in the book. So from that fairly early stage, decisions were taken, but I decided not to make it too rigid. So I had a lot of fun, describing and inventing animals and plants.
Well, the imagery in it, when you're reading it, you definitely list a lot of animals. You list a lot of plants, their mannerisms, what they're doing, whether the fish that's going on in the environment. Can we talk a little bit as just not enough to tell the readers everything about the book, but some of the details in it? Like, for example, the characters in the book. Is it Miago?
Yes.
Now, oddly enough, we mentioned earlier that the book could be read by a 10 or 14-year-old person, and the main character in the book is Miago, right? And he's roughly turning 15 years of age in this story.
That's correct. And when he reaches 15, on his 15th birthday, he has to make what's called his life choice, which is a choice which will determine the way he leads the rest of his life. So it's a fairly formal construct for something which most young adults go through anyway without really realizing it.
Right.
So he's an archetypal, a typical young man, faced with a lot of problems, a lot of doubt, problems at home. He's not getting guidance from his father, and he lives in a society which is very hostile and very aggressive, and there's not a lot of love. But without giving away too much of the plot, the people he lives with, his people, are the remains of a once magnificent and very happy and successful civilization. And he knows, because he hears the myths and the rumors all the time, he knows that his ancestors used to know the secret to getting on in peace with their neighbors, to achieving happiness, to get on well with their environment. So in the background of the novel, there is always this belief and this message that things don't have to be how they are, and he's suffering tremendously. And when he comes to make his life choice, there are options, but most people haven't dared take these options, because most of us get to a certain age in life and we just sail forward and then we see what happens after that. But he's actually a very brave and very questioning young man, and he meets a mysterious stranger who guides him and encourages him, helps him, and little by little he begins to make sense of his world. And the young woman, the girl who he thinks he's in love with, isn't really any great help to him. She's, more conventional. She accepts the rules of the society she lives in. and his people are governed by some fairly shady and unpleasant characters, and most of his people, including his family, don't ask questions. So there's a lot going on, and he's one of the very, very few people, in fact the only person in his year, who stands up and questions the status quo. And the book at that point goes in a radically different direction, which I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, Brad.
Yes, definitely. His father is more rugged. His mother is caring, but still they follow a very strict regimen based off the society of which they live, the little village of which they live. They basically have to make a couple of decisions of their life, and Miyagi he doesn't know which direction to take. He doesn't know whether he wants what's behind door number 1, what's behind door number 2, or what's behind door number 3. And with his girlfriend there, all those points are things that we normally face in a normal life growing up. Looking for your parents, to give you guidance. Looking for the time of your life when you're actually starting to recognize boys and girls, and seeing where you're going with there. What do you want to do with your life? Here in the United States, you're looking at that time of say, okay, I'm in high school now. I'm planning to go to college. What do I want to do with my life? And he's giving these different options. And what's happening is the 3 options that he has seen that's given before him, he doesn't know what he needs to do, and those may not necessarily be the right single one for him to do, but more or less all of them. And he goes through...
That is absolutely the crux of the matter, because he is being forced to make one of 3 choices. But his happiness, his well-being, and the concept of Tokamu is that we actually need to embrace all 3. And so he lives in a society in which he's not allowed to. He's actually prevented from embracing all 3 of these paths. He's only allowed to go down one. And in modern society, it's a very simple analogy, but in modern society, most of us do the same thing. We may develop one part of our lives, our character, but we totally abandon others.
Right.
And although in the Toucan Feather, the powers that be are very clearly defined as people, in the modern age, they're defined slightly more subtly, but they're still there. They're the media, they're the pressures of the media, they're the politicians. There are a lot of processes and forces acting on us in our lives which we all too easily succumb to. And we don't step back, and we don't actually ask important questions, and we get swept along. And I have a huge problem with, for example, the celebrity culture, which has embraced most of the developed world. And it upsets me how I see young people hero-worshipping celebrities who, in many cases, have achieved nothing other than managing to be famous.
I agree.
And part of the problem comes from the media, or a great deal of the problem comes from the media. I know that the media always claims it only presents the news, but actually the media creates the news. It creates these situations. And while Miyagi lives in a primitive society, the problems are exactly the same as they are today. It's just the delivery mechanisms are slightly different.
Well, the book is so deep, going and covering all these things, and again with the characters that you have playing with the Miyagi, his father's, the girl. I even got lost on, before he gets off into that third part of the book, I even got lost into it whenever he was battling these different parts of his life he had to go through. So it's just he fought a shark, and I was completely not expecting the fact that he was going to fight a shark. And the symbolism that would then turn around and play with him later on in the book, or whenever he went out to hunt somebody or to do harm on somebody that he thought had done harm on him, what was being brought back down to him, and he was being guided in a certain direction wasn't necessarily the truth, and how he undertook that with courage, extreme amount of courage to do what he did in the book. Most people would have shunned him for it if the secret would have gotten out. And then
I think that's right. And I think he was tremendously brave. And I think the mysterious stranger who guided him played a very, very important part. What would have happened to him had he not had that support. Well, I don't know, even though I wrote the book. But there are people in his society and in modern society, and there's a character in the novel called Monkey Blood, who's an example, who actually do nothing with their lives. They make no choices which are designed to really address their well-being. So he's a very courageous young man, and he goes through an incredible ordeal at the end of the book, and it's an ordeal which has destroyed every other person from his village who has attempted to achieve the same thing.
Even, the characters between the outside gentleman who came in to start talking to him, to open his mind. And I think that was a huge part right there in the movie, is opening your mind, especially when you're being concealed and contracted, to lead a path 1, path 2, path 3. And he's turning around and getting this little boy, or getting this young man rather, to think, to open his mind, to address his thoughts, and not to answer the boy's questions, but get the boy to ask questions. And the significance of his character is very, very important to the whole philosophy of the book, of getting people to open up. I kind of wondered...
I think you're absolutely right. And I feel that one of the most important components of well-being is education. And the role of a teacher, of a very good teacher, is to equip somebody to ask questions. It's not to fill their head with facts. Obviously they need some facts, but we need to embark on our adult lives equipped with the ability to ask questions and to then make sensible decisions. And a lot of us, I think, are failing in that. And so the role of that character in the book is precisely the role of a teacher, a good teacher. And in fact, he was called a teacher at the beginning of the book, but he was forced to change his name so that the authorities wouldn't find him.
Yeah, exactly. He changed his name several times, as a matter of fact, in order to make sure he kept coming back. I kind of wonder, do you put yourself in the place of the teacher?
I don't think so.
Really? With the book?
I'm certainly not setting myself up as any sort of a guru or anything like that. The reason I wrote this book was that about 10 years ago, some things went wrong in my life. And so I stepped back and I looked at things, and I looked at myself, and I looked at the people around me, and I wondered, did it have to be like this? I've been trained at university, I've been to business school, I've worked in the banking industry in the days when it was respectable. I've been a consultant, and so I really attacked a problem with my educational and professional training in a fairly analytical way at the first stage. I identified a problem, and I thought, how can you actually address this problem? And from there, I wrote the book and illustrated it. So I don't really judge people hugely. I'm not setting myself up as Mr. Perfect or anything like that. All I'm trying to do is to present a book which will get people thinking differently. And part of the Tokamu concept, which I hope to develop over the next year or 18 months into something substantial, the idea behind it is, I think it would be absolutely wonderful if we could get 5, 10, 15, 20% of the people in developed countries to start looking at the way they lead their lives, and for those people to make a significant change. So for some people it'll be about alcohol, for others it'll be about the way they treat their neighbors, for others it'll be about not using drugs, etc., etc. Because what we need to put in place is a beneficial cycle. Once people begin to enjoy life more, be happy, it will become contagious. We all know how, there's that person we know who's always smiling and who's always laughing and enjoying life, and how that rubs off on the people around him. The Tokamu concept is about people beginning to move in that direction, because at the macro scale, at the big scale, the only way we're going to buy us some time for mankind is when people get away from this obsession with how much money they can make, that rat race, which is dragging us all down. So I believe, almost from a businessman's point of view, I believe I've just identified a problem, analyzed it, and attempted to offer a solution.
Okay, 2 points there. One is, I definitely see where, in terms of people, again, are so succumb to money that, it will get them in danger. And there was a part in the book to where you actually hinted on that. As a boy,
Absolutely.
at the end, as he's going through his journey that he absolutely has to take now, because that's where he has been placed, based off his own choices. He's in a situation to where he sees a lot of money, a lot of valuable items, and he has to realize, is this what I'm here for, or where does he go with it? And he makes several very smart choices based off of that. And so, to me, as you would think, most people would go for the money. And, what does he do? He makes very wise choices to do what he needs to do. And that was great. Now, the other part of it is, and the reason why I said that, do you place yourself as the teacher, is because the teacher was getting this boy, Miyagi, to actually open up his mind and think. And that's where I think you're leading people with the book. You're getting people to open up their minds and think in terms of a better lifestyle and in a better way. And so I was kind of thinking maybe that's where you're placing yourself into it. And if you haven't, it definitely does work that way, because you did open up my mind to think about how even me as a father, now I need to look back and say, okay, I need to look and make sure that my son isn't so worried about, having video games, or isn't so worried about the latest clothes and all the other stuff that I need to focus in on, of course, as a good parent, but sometimes may actually just slip away from day to day, or from week to week, or whatever else. And to stay focused on his overall well-being. And so the fact that you're getting people to open up with this book, open up their mind and think with this book, is what's so important. So that's why I was trying to make that association there.
Well, I'm very happy to, if people think I've opened their minds, put ideas in their heads which may not have been there before, that's fine. The character you're referring to in the novel is, a sort of, as you will have seen, a very important, powerful, spiritual type figure. Right. And all I'm saying is I'm not setting myself up as a guru type, but I'm very happy to be considered to be someone who tries to teach.
Right. What's uncovered as the last part of the book, where it's portrayed out to what this character is. I understand. Yeah, I completely understand where you're going with there. Then, even the girlfriend who has to make a choice for her boyfriend, who she's so in love with, the romance part of this. Now, we get people to open up their mind and think about the philosophy of cultures, about the philosophy of the human nature, and there's even romance in this book. It's not, some night up underneath the covers kind of a romance that you would see on late night TV or whatever else in some of these Silicon novels. This is actually a very well-rounded, well-played out romance between just the genuine love between the boy and the girl, and them coming of age for that. I like that part. I thought that was great. It was well played.
Thank you. Well, I think that was quite a difficult part to write, because I was very conscious of the age of the characters themselves and the society they were living in, and I didn't want it to be heavy-handed. I didn't want it to go too far. So I wanted to keep it balanced, and I wanted there to be an underlying message in that theme as well. And I hope I achieved that balance.
You did, because at one point when the boy stood up, and sorry if I'm getting a little teary-eyed here because it was so emotional in it.
Yeah.
And the part where they're making these decisions about who they have to be based off their culture. She's making the decision, and he stands up, and we talked about this earlier, that one significant part where he stands up and says no, and and he's making his choice. He's standing up as a man saying, this is where I'm going to go, and this is what I'm going to do. And the look that she turns around and gives back to him, and that they're still keeping that connection, and he uses that to feed him into his journey for completion. And I think that was I think it was perfect. It wasn't too much of one part of it. It was perfect. It was good writing there.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I kept looking at I was real. That was one of those times I went back and reread the page again. I was like, "This is."
For you, did the book have a happy ending?
Yeah, and it does. It really does. I like the fact that the overall, I guess, the overall happy ending of it is the fact that there's two parts that I picked up on. One was overall paradise, and their overall paradise from the side of earthly wealth that they've now achieved because of the decisions that they've made, and overall paradise in terms of the trilogy of mind, body, and spirit combination.
Yeah.
So there was two really good happy endings to me on there. Was it meant to blend together like that?
Sorry?
I said, was it meant to blend together like that in terms of?
Oh, absolutely. There are a lot of themes in the book which come together in the final quarter of it, and I hope there are some surprises at the end of the book as well. Again, it's back to this idea of metaphor. A lot of things which in his life are meant to mean something turn out to mean exactly the opposite, and the reader is taken along in his mindset. So the reader hopefully is expecting one thing and then discovers exactly the opposite, and sits back and then relates that discovery to the life they're leading now. As you just said, you're going to reevaluate some of the things, some of the decisions you make about your children because of it, and I'm very flattered if it has that effect on people. So it's also a book I hope very much people may read more than once. I have a very big following on Facebook, and a lot of the people who've read it keep sending me messages saying, I read it a second time and it meant something entirely different the second time. And I have one lady who I think she's either read it 3 or 4 times, I'm not sure which. She bought it about a year ago when it was first published, and every time she sends me a message saying, I finally realized what this was about or what that was about.
Nice.
So it's something which is meant to unravel over time, and I've always felt, the most rewarding plays or films or books are ones which you get over a period of time. You suddenly realize, you think about them, you carry on thinking about them, and that's what I was trying to do with The Toucan Feather.
Well, it definitely does. This is also a book, if I could see this, I do see this actually becoming a very huge #1 bestseller, because this is one of those books, if for all the fans out there listening and thinking about buying this book, if you belong to a Book of the Month club and you want to read a book that's going to start you thinking, and then for you to turn around and discuss it with other people who have read the book, this is one of them to do that with. This isn't just some scary horror flick or just some kind of romance novel where the long-haired blonde muscle guy gets the woman. This is one that you literally sit around and you will entrench yourself in discussion with others who have read this book about. So,
and that, I would love to be a fly on the wall in that debate. That would, it would fascinate me. It really would, because people come back to me and they say, "In this bit, did you mean this? Did you mean that?" And I find it fascinating how people interpret things and what they think it means, and I encourage them to do so. That's the whole point. I've put the markers out. It's now up to them to read it and see what it means. And it means slightly different things to different people. But occasionally people come back to me and they see insights in it which are brilliant. Then I think, I didn't mean that. I don't admit it at the time.
Well, that's why I was trying to give you my opinion of some of the pieces that I saw on it, and I'm hoping, man, I really hope I got that right. I'm saying it to the author.
No, I think you did. And when we finished the recording, I may ask you a couple more questions and just tell you a couple of things and see if you got them, because I think you'll be surprised when I tell you things which are staring you in the face in the book, which you may or may not have realized yet.
Okay, we can do that on air if you want. It doesn't matter to me. The names that you picked out for the characters of the book some of them are actually hilarious, And it's different because they have like a regular name, and then they have a tribal name that they're given once they make that transition from when they reach that 15 years of age, and they have to pick the direction for where they go and their actions. It's in a tribal sense, they're given the tribal name, but the names are hilarious because I'm sitting here reading. We mentioned monkey blood earlier.
But then it's a very cruel name as well. I mean, monkey blood is an outcast, and it's no compliment to call someone monkey blood. And so, some of the names are amusing, and I don't think any of us would like to go through life with a silly name. I mean, the characters in the book start their lives with their traditional names, such as Miago and the girl who's called Talui. But when they get to the age of 15 and they have to partake of this ceremony at which they make their life choice, they are given these adult names. And the adult names tie in with the decisions they've been forced to take as to how they're going to lead the rest of their lives.
Right. Now, there's one time that a name I didn't necessarily agree with, and I hope you don't mind me asking you about this. This one character, at the last second on his decision for what he wanted to do, he flinched. And the people who actually, they do this kind of marking symbolism on them, and they then turn around at that time. It's a big ceremony process, and at the time they give them this other name. Well, this one kid flinched, and they gave him the name Dog Spit. And now he's got to live out this life with the name as Dog Spit. And his cousin, who is Miago, says, secretly under his breath, "As long as I live, I will never call you Dog Spit," because that was the wrong name to give him. And I got mad at that point when I saw the name. His name is now going to be Dog Spit. I'm like, what? The kid was about to get, marked with this mark, and he just flinched. He's a kid. Overall, they're 15 years.
I know, and it shows the cruelty of that society. I mean, I don't mind your listeners knowing that at this ceremony, the children are branded on the forehead with a red-hot branding iron. And which is a monstrously cruel thing to do.
It is.
But that symbol which they are branded with, which determines how they must lead the rest of their lives according to this ancient civilization, it's not actually terribly different from how we lead our lives anyway. You can look at people walking past you in the street, and half the time you'll know instinctively quite a lot about that person. So they might just as well have a brand on their, a branding scar on their forehead. And this poor boy who you're referring to, because he refused to obey the rules of the ceremony, got a smudged scar, which doesn't really mean anything to anyone looking at him. And so the powers that be give him this appalling name. And it was upsetting for me to write.
It's interesting you say that. A lot of times people get branded with a particular name like that. You're right when you come down to on how people stereotype people based off the clothes they wear, based off the jobs they have, based off of where they're raised, things like that, and
also physical appearance. How much money they spend on their appearance, whether they look fit, whether they're smoking, all sorts of things. There are all these clues which you can take on board in a glance of 1 second. You can get a reasonably good idea about a person.
Yeah. What new projects do you have coming up? Is there going to be a Tokomo 2, or what are some of the other projects that you're working on?
Well, what I'm trying to do at the moment is I would like the Tokomo symbol to spread around the world, and I know that sounds ambitious, but I think we live in an age of such powerful media that if this catches on, I think it'll catch fire and spread very, very rapidly. There was a book which came out a number of years ago called The Celestine Prophecy, which caught on when the author gave away 1,500 copies. And so I'm getting to that point where I'm hoping, what with the increased power of the internet, that this thing will really take off. I'm talking to one or two potential backers, financial potential backers, one or two companies, and possibly to a government about this whole concept. And any one of those people could help me, really build this thing up, because what it needs is awareness. What it needs is for people to look at the website, buy the book, start talking about it, because the people who have read the book have written the most incredible reviews, and the reviews are on the website. So I think I'm in the very fortunate position of, sitting on something which could be very, very big. And in answer to the second part of your question, I would love to write and illustrate a sequel. And I have the basic plot in my mind. And the illustrations in the Toucan Feather are black and white. I'm going to do some or all of the illustrations in the sequel in colour. And once the thing is taken off, if a large corporation or backer would take it off my hands and put it, out there and get it started, then that would free up my time to write the sequel. But at the moment, I'm busy trying to, promote it and get people to read the book and get a bit of a groundswell going.
Right, understandable. I just hope we don't have to wait. I know you're a perfectionist, and from your work, from your illustrations and everything, I completely agree. But I'm excited about the next project and everything coming up, so I don't want to wait 10 years, so I'm going to push you a little bit to get it sooner than that.
Thank you, Brad. Well, I think realistically, to write and illustrate a sequel would probably be about 18 months to 2 years, and
right, that's
that isn't a huge amount of time. It might be 2.5 years, but I had to teach myself to draw to illustrate the Toucan Feather, and now I have some technique. It'll be quicker.
Your websites, and how can people contact you? We talked about Chocomo.com, we talked about Facebook, or do you have an email address or anything for people to contact you, or would you prefer them?
If anyone wants to contact me, they can just do so through the website, and there's a contact thing, and I will receive any email from there directly, which I'll respond to. That's probably the best way.
Okay, and you have a personal fan. You have a fan page for this on Facebook, and your personal page on Facebook as well. People can contact you and friend you.
I have a personal page on Facebook. Unfortunately, I'm at the maximum friend number. When I start the illustrations on Facebook, I went from 100 friends to the maximum 5,000 in about 3.5 seconds, which is very, very flattering.
Yes,
but I can't add friends on Facebook. I mean, occasionally someone drops out and then there's the space. I had a group on Facebook. I had 2 groups on Facebook with thousands of people on both. But Facebook, in their wisdom, has archived all the older groups, and so those groups have gone.
Yeah.
So at the moment, I do have a fan page in my name on Facebook if anyone's interested, and there's also the Toucan Feather is a page on Facebook as well.
Okay. What about Twitter?
I am on Twitter, but I don't do anything with it, and I probably ought to. But I don't do it. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Flickr. I was on MySpace, but I haven't developed that. So at the moment, if anyone's interested, by all means have a look at the website, and so you can send me a message on Facebook as well.
All right. Okay. So Facebook definitely, website definitely. Contact you on there. We don't give out personal phone numbers, ladies. So sorry about that.
Well, I'm in the UK, and your listeners are in the States. It could be a bit expensive. But certainly, if anyone would like to contact me, I'm very happy to reply via email, and we may swap phone numbers after that.
Okay, that's awesome. I do encourage all of our listeners to go out, buy this book, get on his webpage, talk to him in terms of just asking questions. Make this your Book of the Month Club book. Make this, give it as a gift. Give it to people who really need to open up their mind, who have their minds open, and really need because not only is it just opening up your mind, it's a really good entertaining story as well because of the characters you use in it and how you wrap it all together. It's like a 2-for-1 book. In terms of mind-opening and entertainment. It really is an entertainment book. I got to warn everybody, it is 55,000 words. It's a very long book in terms of wordage, and once you get wrapped into it, you might as well set some hours away because you're going to want to stay enthralled reading it. Because that's exactly where I was. I locked myself in the studio here in my study and started reading it, and I stopped to go get coffee. That's basically what I did. So I really enjoyed it. So.
Well, that's very kind of you. You know, a lot of people have actually said that to me. A lot of people who bought the book took a couple of weeks before they started reading it, and then I'd get a message saying I decided to make a start, and I didn't do anything else for the next 6 hours till I finished it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's the way I was too. That's basically where I was too. So I do encourage everybody again to go to Amazon, whether it's on ebook as well, Kindle, things like that.
It's available as an ebook from, at the moment, only from the printer, who are called Authors Online. I think it's .co.uk, they may be .com, but it's basically a hardback at the moment, a paperback, which is print on demand. I think once we get volume, and we will go to an ebook and Kindle and everything, but it isn't available yet like that.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show. It's been an honor talking to you. It's been an honor reading your book. It's really thought-provoking, and I appreciate it just from the emotions that I've got reading it, from the mind-opening experiences that I've seen, to the joy that I've gotten out of your illustrations. It's a very powerful book in so many ways, and I appreciate the time that you took to write it and all the strength and heart and love that you put into it. So thank you so much for your work here.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, and I hope your listeners enjoy it too.
Well, we definitely will. You have an awesome night, Nicholas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What if the night never turns to day? What if the world never goes my way? Would you ever read the signs? UFOs flying in the sky. What if the stars weren't meant to shine? Human life wiped out of sight. Would you ever read the signs? UFOs flying in the sky. Has the world gone astray? Angels praying, it's not too late. Has the world gone astray? Angels praying, it's not too late. Today, what if the world never goes my way? Would you ever read the signs? UFOs flying in the sky. Are the stars meant to shine?
Our musical guest tonight is Mr. Spoon with his song Crisis Loan.
Go. the souls that she well knows that where the souls is where I'll grow. Then what you wish, careful what you will. To recognize, to synchronize, to recognize, to hearts may go. Now run me round into the ground, now run me round, now to the ground. Recognize, we synchronize, to recognize, to hearts may go. The union of everything, the union to know your soul. To know your soul. To know your soul. To know your soul.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
At Taylor Gifts, we do customized monogramming and embroidery. We can monogram anything from a simple one name on a bib for a baby to a customized logo on a company shirt. We can make gifts for your wedding entourage and gifts for your friends. Label your children's items for school and put names on jerseys for sports. If you have items of your own you want them monogrammed and embroidered, we can do that. Tailor Gifts are sewn with high-quality thread on a professional embroidery machine. So go to the website www.tailorgifts.net, call 251-391-4354, email sales@tailorgifts.net, visit us at ETSY, and Facebook us. We are ready for your orders. The Ghost Tales Television Network, GTN. GTN is designed to give the paranormal TV and filmmaking community the opportunity to showcase their talents and creations. If you believe you have what it takes to create your very own TV show and or short film and you would like the opportunity to showcase your creations, you may contact us at ghosttellstv@gmail.com or call 901-377-7166 for more details. Make sure you visit ghosttellstv.com. GTN, America's Paranormal Superstation.
Thank you for listening to the Friday edition of the Bradshaw Chronicles. I'm your host, Bryan Lee Whatley, and I hope you have an amazing weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next Friday.